Hi guys, and the end, spoken label back in the house. It's a gorgeous sunny afternoon out there today. Absolutely splendid. So I'm saying it kind of sums up my life sometimes. And we're doing spoken label. So we're over to Wales today, and I've forgotten to ask this young gentleman where he's from, but he'll tell us in a minute. Now it's brilliant this today because sometimes when poets contact me to come on spoken label, I don't always know everybody. And this young gentleman, when he contacted me, had a list of quotes on his relation to his debut collection we're going to talk about today. And I actually knew three of the poets on there. So I've had two of them on spoken label, and one the third one I knew. So it's great. Oh, Facebook. Oh, bing, bing, bing. They all came back. All three of them said, he's brilliant, great writer, great lad, get him on. That's the exact words I got off two of them. And the third one was, oh, he's a weirdo, don't bother. No, but seriously, she didn't. Right? She said I've helped mentor him, not nastily, so it was brilliant. Okay, so I thought it made sense to get him straight on. So we've got the wonderful Jamie Woods with us today. Now, Jamie, obviously, first of all, then, mate, start things off today. Introduce yourself to everybody. Tell them what part. Are you from Wales, aren't you? So tell people where you're from and what started off your creativity.
Yeah, hiya. So yeah, I'm Jamie. I'm not that young.
Oh,
I
listen, mate, you're
moved
young
to
compared to me, right? I'm 51, right? So,
yeah, 45. I
oh
moved to
yeah,
Swansea maybe.
pardon my English. No fucking way, right? Right, sorry, go on, back to you, mate.
I
Sorry,
know.
mate.
No, it's fine, yeah. I have very youthful good looks. What can I say? Yeah, so I moved to Swansea about 25, 26 years ago, to come to uni. Before that, I lived in South London. I was born in Newcastle. Um, my mum and dad moved around quite a lot, but Swansea is the first place I really felt
Hmm.
home, and I've not left it. I've not had any real desire to leave here. It's just the nicest town, and I live just on the outskirts, and it's bang tidy, mate. I love it.
Bang
Yeah,
tidy,
adopted
God, yeah.
Welshman. So
God.
yeah,
Yeah, I was
subsidized my
thinking your
kids.
accent wasn't Welsh, and I thought myself, but you're in Swansea, but you've
Yeah,
been there for a while, so that can make sense. So, okay, you were telling me
yeah,
off
it
mic
comes out from
before,
time to
obviously.
time.
You told me off mic before. You actually started off as a short story writer, didn't you? So, tell us about that.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, like all my sort of teenage years, I was like writing bad lyrics, for bad punk songs, as many of us do, and that continued well into my 20s. And at about the age of 30, I went to the Open University to do a degree in literature because I was working in a call center and I was bored and I loved reading books. And I thought I may as well get, a qualification out of it. And after about 2 years, it was like, this is hard work. I'm going to do creative writing. That sounds like a DOS. So I took creative writing module and I just really got into it. I discovered short stories, far more, there's so much more niche than novels are, and I just fell in love with short stories. So Raymond Carver, Angela Carter, Dan Rhodes, Dorothy Edwards, all the people on the shelf that's directly behind my head at the moment. In fact, Ali Smith is massive. Oh my God, Ali Smith is just the greatest. And I thought, yeah, I can do that. So I just started writing short stories. I got quite lucky. I had one published in Evergreen Review, which is an incredible magazine, and that was like my first one of my first things to get published. Was like gobsmacking. um and I did a master's in creative writing at Cardiff, and then stopped having anything interesting to write about because I stopped working as a call center agent. I stopped being bored. I stopped daydreaming. I was too busy thinking and checking, like, because I was like a social media manager, and so I was like always checking my phone. Even on the bus, I wasn't reading, I wasn't writing. Um, and then in 2019, I was just randomly ill. Turned out I had acute promyelocytic leukemia. Really affected my vision as well as my health. But I couldn't read at all. So I started listening to podcasts. I do not have the attention span to listen to an audiobook. That was just driving me mad. But I kind of missed that sort of storytelling nature. And, roundabout ways, I got into just like listening to some poetry podcasts, and that was really cool. And at the same time, I was writing down my notes and trying to piece together what had happened, because my illness was really hard hitting, and it was like 3 months of just not really knowing what was going on.
Yeah,
My
I
wife
had
had
that.
been giving
I
me.
had, as I told you before, I became diabetic when I was 39, and I did something similar to me. It took me what 4 months before I got used to it. Yeah, and they're pumping me full of insulin at the time, and I couldn't even see properly for months afterwards. So yeah,
Yes, it's not fun, and you just got no idea what's going on. And yeah, so I was like trying to piece together my timeline, and I was writing these notes, and
mm.
I was having therapy as well because my illness was really quite bad. My treatment wasn't bad, but I was on chemotherapy, and yeah, I was really quite seriously ill. I had pneumonia along the way as well, just to add on to the joys of it all.
God,
Um, yeah, so that was fun. So in sort of like me and my wife would like piece together what had happened, and she'd explain to me, the various events. And I was
mm.
making notes, and I had a notebook in hospital. I couldn't really read what I was writing, but I just wrote random sort of moments of clarity that came to me, or
Yeah,
like
yeah, of
song
course.
lyrics or things that I'd heard on the radio that just like meant something to me at that moment in time. And it was sort of going through that, and then also going through therapy. I started to, you sort of work through these things by writing them down. Um, and I was like, well, I'm not going to write a novel because no one wants to read this novel. Is I'm not excited enough. There's no like love story here. I've been married for 20 years. My kids are fine. I don't die at the end of it. But because of like the acuteness of the illness, it really sort of these little fragments, these little moments really suited poems. And I was just playing. I was bored. I was off work. I was, I'd have like a month on, a month off of chemo. So in those months off, I was like playing Animal Crossing, and I couldn't sleep. So I may as well just write stuff down, and I was sort of coming together with some poems. I went to a couple of online poetry workshops just to maybe get my head back into it, and sent them off. And the rest is not history so much, but it's where I started really. I got some lovely rejections, I got some lovely acceptances, and I've just carried on because I was just writing them for myself. But I just thought, why not? Literally, you only live once, and I nearly died. So why not? Why not see if I've still got it?
Oh,
And
brilliant, brilliant
lots of
stuff, mate.
people
Yeah,
seem to think that I'm all right. Yeah,
yeah. It's a great collection you sent me. It's a brilliant, brilliant chapbook.
thank you.
Now, obviously, I said 40. I'm gonna. Well, I think we should really touch on about the chapbook. Obviously, people are wondering.
Mm.
Rebel Blood. I get this right now. Rebel Blood Cells, and then there's I think there's a band called Blood Red Cells. That's what nearly caught me out then. So
Okay.
Rebel Blood Cells, yeah. But obviously,
Rebel
like,
blood cells. Yeah,
yeah, it's a great title. It really is a great,
thanks.
great debut collection. This one. Now, obviously, to begin with, then, why Rebel Blood Cells as the title?
Yeah, so I think I started sending it out when I had this sort of mass of poems. Um, I don't have like a great amount of poems. I have
Hmm.
probably about 40 that I'm happy with. And there was this distinct chunk that
Hmm.
were about cancer, were about my experience having cancer. And for me, it just felt like I need to package these up and get them out of my life. In a good way, in a cathartic way, I can put that to bed. I don't want to be, I would like to be a poet going forward over the next few years, but I don't want to be cancer poet. I don't want to be leukemia poet. I have had that. I will always write about my disabilities. I've had mental health problems all my life, but it just seemed to me that there was an opportunity to tell a story. Um, and when you're reading I'm not saying mine is the best, but when you're reading the best chapbooks, the rest, even the best collections, it's great when you have a story running through it, a narrative running through it, even if it isn't like explicitly, day one, day two. And stuff like Jamie Hale's Shield, or Hannah Hodgson's 163 Days, just wonderful bits of work about being ill, and take that kind of story. So I wanted to do that, but I wanted to do it kind of me. And then I am a bit of a punk. I'd like to be. I work for like a multinational tech company, but in my in my heart, I'm punk. I'm a bit of a rebel. I love Star Wars, and I'd written one of the early poems that I wrote for the collection. One of the first ones that got published was called "The Acute Pro-Myelocytic Rebellion of 2019,"
Title.
and
Good
because
title.
I know, right? And the way that my leukemia manifested is that my white blood cells decided to go against what they're supposed to do. instead of maturing, they've remained as a bunch of teenagers hanging around, causing trouble. And in the poem, I sort of depict them as rebel, rebel blood cells, rebel cells. And then you've got that other sort of, rebel cells, like a group of rebels. And yeah, it just seemed to work, and I liked it. And I love Star Wars, and Viva the Rebellion. It's just in my heart, and it just seemed like the best title that I could have. Also, there's a White Stripes album called White Blood Cells as well, and that's a pretty cool title for a record. But yeah, it just seemed right, and it didn't seem too generic. Yeah, I just really like the title, and I'd like to say, look, this was what happened to me when my blood cells rebelled against me,
Brilliant.
and how I rebelled against them.
Yeah, I can't believe. Of course, it's like a fighting back book, this one, and it really is, because I can just feel I can well relate to this. So, okay,
Yeah,
next port points. I want to. We've had a hint about this before off mic, and people go into the collection. The first thing they will come across after the usual bits and pieces is a quote by Joan Didion. Now, I know her because she's regarded as a new journalist in the style of Hunter S. Thompson, who I'm pretty sure has mentioned her. So, why that quote then? And I'm guessing you're a big fan of her works to put that quote there straight away.
yeah, very much so. I've always loved epigrams. I love them. I may get into trouble for having used these if like somehow my book sell 100,000 copies, which it won't. I might get into trouble for using them. But I've got 5 epigrams in there, which have all meant a lot to me. In terms of I'm almost writing as a reaction to them, and I think that's the way that you don't get into trouble with them. Is if you're writing them almost as you're writing to them, not as an endorsement, but as a this is my prompt. And the one is like life changes in the instant. It's from A Year of Magical Thinking, which I'd read, like maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Mm.
And it's kind of stuck with me because in that book, everyone, I think, when they go through a serious illness, thinks they've had the worst possible experience ever. And it's always nice to be able to relate to other people's experiences, whether you're saying, "Oh, I can empathize with that," or "Oh my God, maybe I didn't have it that bad." That year of magical thinking is the year in which she lost her husband and her daughter,
Oof.
and
Oh,
she just. And that's how it happened to me. Your life changed in the instant. I had a acute illness. I generally went from like being, Mr. Highfalutin businessman, going to football with my dad. And then I was within like 3 days, I was in hospital, like hooked up to all the machines, all the IVs. Yeah, it just goes like that. You just don't expect it. A lot of the book deals with that kind of changing of plans and not really knowing what the future holds. And all of a sudden I do like it was the first time in my life that I'd been able to like book a family holiday. We were going to go away to Tenerife or Lanzarote, I can't remember which. We had to cancel that. And I was going to Japan, and I was so excited to go to Japan. I've wanted to go to Japan like all my life. Like it would have been amazing, and I had to cancel that. And it just changes. You just don't see it coming. I'd booked to take my wife away for our wedding anniversary. That's the first time we were going to go away for our wedding anniversary for years since we'd had kids. And again, it was just like that. It just snapped, like change, and that's what really stuck with me. I mean, Joan Didion's a brilliant writer. Her books are just incredibly heartfelt and human, and I think that's the key thing. And being able to sort of step back almost and deal with those sort of really sad emotions, but at the same time, write in a matter of fact manner. That's what I really loved about her at the time, and then rereading her since. Yeah, just in love.
yeah, I can't blame you. Great choice. A great choice for a quote because you're a great writer indeed. So, on your collection itself, and obviously looking into the collection now, in your words. Now, people will notice it is split into 5 sections. I will
Yeah,
mention
it
the names of
is.
each of the title sections, and I want to do a deep dive on this. That's a good way of putting it here. So, if people looking, it's in 5 sections of A, Before I Knew, B, Singleton Admissions Unit, 3, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce the first one, something Ward Cardiff. My Welsh is bollocks. Apologies anyway from Wales. I love you all, right? But I can't pronounce that. Ward 11 and 12 Swansea, and E home. Now, it's quite, obviously, it's a strict narrative. I can see that, what's going on. But what made you want to do the collection in sections like that?
Because I think my mindset in each of those different situations was very different. You know, the before I knew is kind of like we've just covered, the reaction to that Joan Didion quote. It's how life can just go bang at a blink of an eye. Then you have the confusion, I think, of when I got taken in, just admitted as a patient, not admitted as a leukemia patient. I went to the doctors, and the doctor said, he's a very ill man. You need to take him. And they took me to the hospital. And I was just like in hospital, not knowing what was going on. I had a temperature of like 40 degrees or something daft. I don't remember a single thing, mate. It was awful. Anyway, so that kind of covers that confusion and that diagnosis and how I found out, because it was a fever dream. It really was a fever dream that whole time. I got moved to Cardiff Hospital, it's a specialist centre where they thought they could treat me a bit better. And that was a time for reflection because I was away from my family. It's about an hour's drive to the hospital. I was in a private room, not like a private healthcare room, but just in a single room because I was so ill. They didn't have any windows, and I would just, and they couldn't treat me because my chemotherapy drugs tried to break me completely, so they couldn't treat me for that. So I was just wondering, it was like being in rehab, but also knowing that you might well die. It was a very, very strange experience. Then you've got the sort of more terrifying, I am going to die, when I had pneumonia. And again, that Ali Smith quote, remainder you must leave. That's there. And then, home was where I then went through the whole therapy situation and learned more about myself. And I think, I could have just given you, 24 poems in a row, but I like the idea of being able to compartmentalize them a little, and to theme them. I'm a big stickler for design. If you look at like a New Order album cover or a Joy Division album or a Manic Street Preachers album covers, they're just beautiful. And I just really like the way it works. I just really like the way that I could split them all up. And I've totally used the same font that the Manics use on the Holy Bible, Jill Sans Nova, because it just looks perfect for this.
My favourite albums in the Manics is the Holy Bible. And I know I saw them at Manchester, which is on my age now, on that tour. They all came on, did most of the first album set all in balaclavas, like they were something from some rather controversial military people, should we say, at the time, right?
I was there at the Astoria in 93, 94, Richie's last gig. It was amazing. Absolutely. I love that band so much. And they're a big influence on me. But, I really love that kind of design aesthetic. And, I just felt that it flowed better. I'm not trying to like pretend that I've got a full collection of 48 pages when it's just 24 poems and 5 blank pages. But yeah, it just worked a bit better that way. I felt it wasn't like a great literary theory or anything behind it. It just looked nicer.
Yeah, I think it lets the collection breathe in its own way by doing it that way as well. So that's a good point. So, okay, I want to talk next, obviously, about a couple of the specific poems in the book. These are not, obviously, I can't, anyone this podcast, I can't promise Jamie will read all 4 of these pieces out in the second half. I'm not putting him under that sort of pressure. He may not read any of them, right? But there's a few I want to talk about in general, okay? I loved, these are not, by the way, also, these are not just my favourite pieces in the collection. There's just 4 I thought, right, will warrant the conversation. So, to begin with, then, I thought I had a cold. I loved this piece. Great start into the collection, this one. I loved as well, particularly at the end of it, where you strip down the last 3 lines in to build the point up in the piece. People look at it like, not the lines aren't longer length anyway, but the last 3 go shorter and shorter and shorter. It's like you're building the point when it's saying like you thought it was just cold, like you're whispering it. in hindsight, you damn well knew it wasn't. Was that
Yeah,
the point we were trying
yeah,
to raise with that?
yeah, absolutely. So leukemia is a weird one.
Hmm.
It's a form of blood cancer. I didn't know it was cancer. I just thought it was a weird children's disease, which is something I cover in another section, in another poem of the book. But I've been very involved in the sort of Spot Leukemia campaign, and there's like 6 key symptoms to leukemia, and they're
Hmm.
things like fatigue, bruising and bleeding, joint pain, muscle pain, breathlessness, and fever, and something else because I always forget one, no matter how hard I try. And I was just like, looking back. What had happened is I went to see a football match with my dad on the Saturday, and on the Sunday, me and my mum and dad and my family went to the park, and I felt really rubbish. I just felt really poorly. Sunday evening, um, I lay down and went to sleep. My kids were still awake. I went down and fell asleep on the sofa. Um, Monday, I thought I had a cold. I drank Lemsip. I drank a lot of Lemsip, and it would get my fever down. And yeah, it's fine. By the Wednesday, my wife was like, Wednesday, Tuesday, well, I can't even remember. I can't remember. By like the third day, my wife was like, "This is ridiculous, mate," because we are sitting there watching TV, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah," like really wheezing all the time,
Oh God.
because I couldn't catch my breath. And so I agreed to go to the doctors next day because you know what some of us like, I go to the doctors. I don't want to go to the doctors. I don't go to the doctors. So I went to the doctors, and like I said, they told me that no, you don't have a cold, you don't have Lemsip. You need something far more serious than this, and you need to go to hospital. So I tried to tie in those leukemia symptoms with what had happened to me, as a way of raising awareness for the Spot Leukemia campaign. And like I now work with the charity Leukemia Care, who helped me quite a lot, as their poet in residence, which is a title that I made up and asked to do, because I just feel that having that kind of emphasis on poetry gave me so much comfort in the time afterwards, in the time after having my diagnosis, and being able to share your story is really important. I don't think you write poetry unless you believe in the proper power of poetry to
No,
be able to be a
definitely.
force of good, to be able to change the world. And like I said, I'm a rebel. You know, I want to read fighting poetry. I want to read protest poems, and this is my protest against leukemia, and its stupid, vague symptoms. It's just got such a low profile. There's no lumps to look for. Um, you can't really run a campaign saying, "Oh, have you got a fever? Might be leukemia." That sucks, man.
It
Everyone's
does.
just going
It
to
does.
panic.
No, I had that when I got I came with diabetes because I was dead lucky. Because in my case was I collapsed at work.
Oh God.
I'd had a drop in weight and I was urinating a fair whack. It was getting greener and greener, but I didn't twig. And my case is identical to yours. I collapsed, woke up in hospital. Blood sugar readings are 32, which usually everyone's running at 25 and 8 it should be. And I was told if I'd carried on, I probably would have dropped dead in a couple of weeks' time. But I knew people, as I'm sure you're the same, you talk about the mum stuff. I knew people lost feet. I know people's had an eye took out. Someone's lost a hand. So you do it. It makes you realise, doesn't it? Like you look how lucky you can be sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, like my particular branch of leukemia, only about 100 people get it in the UK each year,
Oof, not
and
many.
so it's it's quite rare, so it's not always spotted straight away. But B, leukemia is not always spotted straight away. You have 2 types of leukemia: chronic
Mm,
and acute. And chronic is like a
yeah.
lifetime thing. Acute is like bang, you've got it and then you're cured, hopefully. And 5 years ago, the treatment that I had 4 years ago,
Mm.
wasn't the normal treatment, and the treatment that was, so if I'd got this a year earlier, I wouldn't have got the same chemotherapy drugs, and I would have had a much lower chance of reaching remission and staying in remission. I was so lucky, mate, so lucky, and I get that, to be alive. Yeah, so I'm all about sort of spreading the awareness of the symptoms of leukemia, because I didn't know. I thought I had a cold. I thought I had a cold are the last 3 lines of that poem, and that's how it feels to me. I just feel so stupid. And at the same time, like lucky. Yeah.
No, I can relate to that. I can agree completely with it. So it's as you do see because a lot of it is that first piece is the acceptance basically of it. You think it's somewhat minor, you kick yourself. You missed it. No, that's what really hit me hard with that one. So next piece I want to talk about again because it's like even though we're different illnesses, there's similarities I can relate to. Like the acceptance in this book was the silence of the hospital ward. Like it was, I remember when I was took in. I was in a ward of people and men in their 60s and 70s. I was 38. Like, and I sat there thinking, I shouldn't be here. But then all you get used to is silence, the waiting. And that's what this piece made me feel of. Is that what, particularly you're going about, silence is elusive, is inclusive. And it's a great, great image in it. It says nothing,
Yeah.
it means everything. So,
Yeah. Because, like, you think about places like libraries, when we were
okay,
kids, the
yeah, I
libraries were
agree.
really quiet. And like, I take my daughter to the library now, and it's so noisy. There's always like Lego Club or Nintendo Switch Club. And the idea of being able to get some quiet there is just ridiculous. Love it though, because, who sits there in a reference library anymore? Not me. But
Yeah,
yeah, the hospital ward was really strange because you'd think it was quiet and it would seem quiet compared to the sort of bustle of outside, and especially the sort of canteens normally quite near to the sort of admissions ward, and that's really busy and lots of people in there, and all the outpatients are buying their coffees and whatever, and then it's like lights out, and they just have this uniform lights out time of 10 o'clock or whatever, and you think, right, okay, time for sleep. No, 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 you're not going to get to sleep because you're in a ward with like 6 to 8 other really ill people, 6 to 8 other people who have really bad breathing problems, or they have something that goes or beep, beep, beep all through the night. And they've got one of those clocks that, has a, and I hate those clocks, and I would never have one in my house. I have digital clocks all the way, cannot stand the ticking of
Oh,
a clock.
God,
And then
God,
you have
no.
those.
Oh, God.
Oh my God. And it was just so much to try and just get some peace. And I'm trying to get better. And they're like, you need to rest. And I can't rest because there's so much noise going on. And it's just ludicrous. And there's just every single aspect of it was just so possible. And they would only give you a sleeping tablet every 24 hours. And you couldn't have one within 24 hours. So every day you'd ask for a sleeping tablet and they'd be like, you have to wait for another hour. And then it'd be like, by day 5, it'd be like 4 o'clock in the morning. You're like, can I have a Zopper clone, please? And like,
Oh,
you still got 10 minutes to wait. And you'd be like, oh my God, come on. This is just a vicious cycle we're in here now.
yeah, well related to that. Yeah, you do.
And so I
We,
just slept. Yeah. I would just get my um, noise defenders, noise cancelling headphones on, and just listen to podcasts and listen to Radio 4 especially, because I had no interest in 90% of the stuff they were saying. But there's something about, drifting off to the shipping forecast, and then, waking up to some good theology. Always an interesting mix of topics. Nothing enough to make you want to concentrate or phone in about like you would on Radio 5, but certainly enough to listen to when you're awake and to just let drift in the background when you're asleep. But you just got all those different people, and everyone's got their own story in a hospital ward. You know, I touch on this in another poem about one of my roommates. And there's two of us sharing a room, and it was awful because he was like on his way out, and I was still very much within my journey, and just being, just a curtain away from their family, being so happy. And on the other
oh
side, just
God,
me and my wife just in tears. It's
oh
so hard. And
God,
I just pulled my curtains all around when I was on the ward. I was just like, get the curtains, just yank them all around. So no one was giving me anything. But the worst thing is, right, Singleton Hospital in Swansea is overlooks the sea. It is beautiful. And unfortunately, in the summer, it sucks. And I was there in August, and the sun just hits it, and it's so hot in there. And my
oh wow,
eyes got messed up. I had a bleed behind my right eye,
oh
and
God, yeah, yeah,
I was getting headaches and stuff, and like visions and stuff. And so I just have like my shades on. They put me right by the window, and it's terrible. So I just like pull my curtains round, get some
Oh,
privacy, and they just come round. The nurses would like open your curtains, and the cleaning staff would just pull your curtains open. You'd be like, no, leave me alone. And then yeah, it's really, really difficult to get that peace and trying to get better. And I'm not suggesting that the NHS needs to waste all of their money making single wards, but oh my God, it's tricky. And it was a
oh,
really desperate situation. Hearing people die, that's not fun. And part of that singleton admission unit part of the chapters was there were people in there in this like admissions bits. It was like where you go where they're not quite sure whether they're wrong with you, but they know you need to be in hospital. And the
oh,
screams, oh my God, the screams. And I probably contributed. I had to have a biopsy when I was in there, and I did not enjoy that.
oh,
Um,
God.
but yeah, it's just I wouldn't let my kids come visit me when I was in there because the screams were scaring me, and they
Yeah.
were 10 and 6 at the time.
Oh,
No way would they come into that. Yeah, it's
oh,
horrible, horrible, horrible.
God, yeah. God, yeah, I know I can relate to that. When I was in, well, with diabetes, thankfully I've got no children, but I'm not with, at that point, I wasn't with my wife, with somebody else. I wouldn't let her come and visit me in hospital because there was a woman in the
Yeah,
hospital in the next ward to me. They kept screaming out every hour, pressed the cord, help, help, I'm dying, I'm dying. And that went on for hours. And it wasn't, it's
yeah.
just, oh, he does it. They're not always the best places to go into, and they leave you traumatized coming out. That's a sure of it. So,
Mm. Yeah,
yeah,
and I
I
think
can, I
in
can
terms
relate
of
to
right, yeah, it's been one of the best pieces. It's like my party piece almost, as a poem. So yeah, I'll definitely read this at the end. It's the one that I normally go to read it in open mic because I think it just captures that kind of sound of it all. And I tried to get that repetition, and the feel of the beeps and the repetition and the repetition of noises and trolleys and stuff. So yeah, it's I'm really proud of that one. I really like it. And it's yeah, really proud of it.
understandable, mate. No, it's a tremendous piece. So, okay, on to piece number 3 then. Well, we're going to I'll skip these last two because I don't want to. I want to give you time to read a couple of pieces for us. So,
Yeah, yeah, sure.
and this is the longest title one in the book, and you're going to tell me the title of this because I can my pronunciation of medical
I shall
conditions and
read it for
drugs,
you.
yes, is awful. So it's a side effect of. I'll let you read it all for us, mate.
Yes, it's a side effect of hydroxycarbamide brackets to be taken when other chemotherapy drugs aren't working.
Now, it's a brilliant piece
Yeah,
because I can well relate to this when I've had bouncing problems with my diabetes tablets and injections when I was on them. So, what made you first of all want to do the piece? Such a long title like that.
I love a good title.
Oh, me
Um,
too. Me too. It's tremendous.
yeah, I mean, is this longer than the one about Brian? I'm not sure. There's another title which is also ridiculously long, which is called something like "To Brian, who I genuinely please got better and hope is well, and whose happiness I do not begrudge. Sorry." Is that longer? It's
I
about the same length.
I think
Anyway,
they've got to be close. Yeah, straight away. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, but yeah, yeah. I love titles. I've just read a book by Elspeth Wilson, which is called something like "Too Hot." Oh God, was Too Hot to Sleep. And it's brilliant book. Highly recommend it. Her titles are just like amazing, absolutely brilliant titles. And so I feel like I'm in good company with her. But yeah, I love a good title. I think if you can say what you need to say in a title, that really sets up the mood for the poem. And the important thing here is that this was a drug that I shouldn't have had to take. This was a drug that I had to take because my proper drugs didn't agree with me the first 2 times I tried taking them. So this was like a generic drug, and this was the
Mm.
chemotherapy drug that did what all good chemotherapy drugs do, made you lose your hair. And so I wasn't this beautiful. I was like, I looked like Moby. It was
Oh
just like,
God.
oh my god,
Oh God.
you know, I'm a hair boy. I've always had like and right now it's quite short. I had it cut maybe like I don't know a month ago. But I generally get it cut like once every 6 months. Down to my shoulders kind of thing, and then it's like, no, it's too long, get it cut. So this is the first time in my life I've ever rocked that really really short crop look, and losing my hair was traumatic because I've never been a big fan of how I look as a person. I think we all have that kind of image issues to an extent. And I've never liked that, but I've always been very proud of my hair, which is so vain. Oh my God, it's so vain, but so true. And to lose it, to see it fall out, and to just be sat there with my
Oh,
curtains all around me in the ward, just seeing it just appear. I was reading, I think it was Private Eye. I was trying to read Private Eye, couldn't read. Didn't know that I needed
oh,
glasses at the time,
God.
and this eye wasn't working anyway. And I was just trying to read Private Eye, and then just, like hair just dropping onto the magazine, and it was just awful. It was just awful. And I was like, I can't do this, can't do this. So
God.
got some clippers, boom, gone.
Well,
Because what's the point of getting stressed about it? You know, what's the point of watching that every day? It's like your glimmer of who you are and your identity just circling the bottom of the shower. You know, horrible, horrible. So from gone, and yeah, and this was it. That was the moment that I felt like a cancer patient, because up until then I just like some bloke who was in a hospital who occasionally had a thing chucked in his arm, who had an eye patch, and it wasn't, it could have been anything, and then the hair, and that was it. That was it for me. Funnily enough, I've got a really bad chest infection at the moment. Funny, but the sinus problems that have gone for that have actually given me the same black eyes that my treatment had. So that was all I had staring back at me, when I shaved my head, was these black eyes, oh
wow.
yeah, it's really
Oh,
difficult. And yeah, like, those are the dark, tired eyes that stare back. And I just saw them in the mirror last night, and I was like, oh my God. Um, yeah, a little bit of a flashback there, a little bit of a trigger.
wow.
But yeah, it's been an interesting journey, to say the least. But yeah.
Wow. Nice. Nice. That's certainly,
Cool.
I think, oops. You can see, everybody, we've gone 3D for a second here, Jamie. I think I've stressed him out that much. He's tipped the
Yeah.
camera upside down.
Oh my God, the laptop fell over, man. It's a disaster.
All
Never
the
done
other
that
saying
before.
is basically, I think everyone's wondering, Jamie's trying to make sure we're not all not fell asleep after that through stress. So, okay, mate, seriously, back to the last point I want to
Yeah,
talk about today is one of the pieces at the end of the collection, which
sure.
it's got some very unusual line breaks in this. I want to know more what was the choice
Oh,
behind
okay.
this, which was
Hmm.
No More, which is a great piece, but what made you want to do the unusual line breaks that he did in this piece?
Yeah, there's two bits about the line breaks, I think. In what It's a sort of sister poem to a poem early on in the book, called
Mm,
Diagnosis, which has the same staggered line breaks. So they're like, I think each verse is 4 or 5 lines long,
mm,
um, and they just cut in a little bit each time. So they have a line break, as you were, but like with an extra tab. Just trying to picture it for the viewers slash listeners. I just Again, there's a little bit stylistics, but a little bit. It just made sense to me. It was simply a case that I thought that these little sections drifted quite nicely
yeah,
together. There's like little mini conversations, and they progressed. And that just seemed to me the best way to progress them in a kind of flow,
yeah,
a
it
sort
works
of
really well.
waterfall trickle down effect. You know,
Works really well.
um,
Yeah,
yeah, I think that's but it just works so much better and just made them so much clearer. And I think one of the great shames about poetry is that. So I was saying this in something that I wrote the other day, but that so many brilliant poems are restricted to a house style. They have to be in the same font that magazine always has, and they have to fit on an A5 page, and they can't be a massive A3 poster, or they don't take the kind of stylistic challenge. And I think, you know, I'm trying to guess who it was that I heard say this on your podcast a couple of months ago. It might have been Caitlin. Um, Caitlin McKenna could have been. Or it might have been Sky. That was her surname, wasn't it? Goodnight, the Sky. One of those two said something about, art and poetry being art and the paper being art. Um, and I think it's important to kind of fill it and to have the words embraced with the paper almost, and to really engage with the page. And I just felt that it did so much better, that it was kind of a drifting off conversation. So the diagnosis for me drifted across my mind because I was drifting in and out of consciousness. And then the acceptance of no more is me reaching the end of my PTSD therapy, and putting all that to bed and moving on with my life. So it's the perfect closer for the book, the perfect closer for the sort of cancer chapter. But again, those conversations that you have in therapy aren't necessarily the last 15 minutes of the last session. They're what you've been working towards. So they are all this kind of trickle down effect. And they're drifting across you as your brain comes to deal with these situations, as your mind comes to understand what's going on.
Yeah. No, of course, I get it completely with it. So excellent stuff indeed. So, okay, a couple of things to wrap up on today, because I said I want to give you plenty of time to do a bit of reading of us in the second half. Now, I agree with you. It's a great way of just coming to the end of the collection for that piece anyway. Okay.
Thank you.
What plans do you have next then for your creativity? Would you like to do a second collection?
I'd like to do a collection, yeah. I just feel like this is like a spin-off album. It's like an EP.
Or a
like
side project, that sort of thing.
Yeah. It's like a little 10-inch to get people interested, and then you put out the LP later. Yes, I'd love to do a full collection. I'd love to do more. I've sort of working to do my own publishing imprint, Punk Dust Poetry, which is my baby. Again, we're sort of focused on protest, the disenfranchised voices, people whose stories whose voices don't always get heard and that need to be heard. I'm not interested in. I'm happy to read any poetry ever, and find the good in all of it. But I don't want to publish a poem about a flower, unless that flower's going to take down a government. I, that doesn't need to be said. It's it's a nice thing to say, but it doesn't need to be said. Something that needs to be said is what I'm into. So I'm writing poems. I've done a couple of ekphrastic challenges with the wonderful Paul Brooks of the Wombwell Rainbow.
I've dealt with Paul before. Yeah, great guy.
Yeah, he's wonderful. So every April, he's like posts up a bunch of pictures, and you have to write a poem about it. And oh my God, it's hard work. By the end of April, you're like, why did I sign up for this, mate? Why? But it's been really good in fact, at least one of the poems, maybe two of the poems in the book sprung out from that, because it just gives you an interesting way into jumping into something. So that's been good. But most of my stuff is currently written by listening to the same song on repeat until I've got a poem.
God, yeah.
And that might... Now, the poems don't necessarily relate to the song at all, but they're a creative response to them, I guess. So that's been really interesting, and I've written some really good stuff. In my opinion, I know that at least one of them goes down really well at open mic nights and stuff like that. And, I'm restricted because I'm still immunocompromised, so I haven't really left the house since like before I got ill, because I started chemotherapy. I was continuing to have chemotherapy when COVID happened, so I haven't really left the house to do anything. So I don't go to any events, but I do go to online open mics. So I do a few of those, and it's just trying to meet people on the internet and see where that takes me poetry wise. I've never met a kind of community, a nicer community. So many wonderful people, so friendly. It's been lovely and so supportive. Like, I love doing Top Tweet Tuesday on Twitter, which is run by Matthew Smith, with Black Bow poems. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Because he would just give you a prompt to write an imagistic poem of X amount of time, or how many letters, or all these kind of weird little prompts, and they're just fun. And even if I don't share them, I've still done something. But yeah, I've probably got about half a collection. I also wrote another short story, which I hadn't done for forever, which is going to be published. In fact, Yeah, it's a good one. You're aware of Bill Drummond from the KLF?
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I've had the
yeah.
pleasure of meeting those two over at the Corner House in Manchester years ago. Interesting
Well, I
experience.
now own.
I wasn't there when they burnt the money, but I know somebody that was.
Oh my God. Well, anyway, so yeah, I own the 62nd year of Bill Drummond's life. So that's interesting because I wrote him a short story to go in his forthcoming autobiography. Um,
Well, only he could do
and
something like that, do you know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah. I wrote him a short story, and I now have a certificate somewhere behind me that says I am the owner of his life for the
Oh,
year that he was 62.
wow,
So that's
brilliant
cool. I'm
stuff.
really excited about that. But
I've
yeah,
got to ask you then very briefly, obviously, because we want to leave people in suspense when that comes, whatever happens to that project. How did it feel about writing a short story again then after years of not being able to do it?
it was really easy. Uh,
I
I
like
know
it.
it
It
sounds
was
terrible,
really
doesn't it?
easy. It does
It's
now, but it's
embarrassing.
no, it's I am in the same boat, mate, because I tried writing novels when I was younger, couldn't manage it, went into poetry. Then I've come back to it and I'm older. And I think sometimes if you had a couple of good years on doing one creative medium, it makes it easier to do something else.
I think that's my problem. So the writer Donna Tartt, who wrote Secret
Yeah,
History and Little Friends
oh
and all that,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
she
Great
has
choice.
this. Unfortunately, I took all of my writing advice from her, and as you all know, she writes a book every 10 years, and she likes to write each book word by word, pebble by pebble. I think that was a quote, something like that. I stupidly took that on. What I should have learned is just write and then edit it. But no, I was always obsessed with like writing beautiful, really dense, wonderful sentences, the kind of stuff that you'd write in poetry, but trying to stretch that over 80,000 words.
Oh
And oh
no.
my God, no, no, no,
Eh, eh.
no, no. And trying to do it first time.
Old
No.
Andy N tip, don't bother. Yeah, I agree.
Oh yeah. Now, none of that stuff. I just write emails to myself with. I don't use notes apps because I get confused with them. But I write emails to myself just like this is my poem, and then I'll send another email to myself, quoting that one and just changing all the words. And eventually, it might make its way into a Word document. And then eventually, it might make its way into a vaguely formatted Word document with spell checking done.
Oh
But
God.
yeah, I don't do that word by word thing anymore because it's hard work. There's a
Oh,
reason why for my masters I didn't turn in the first three chapters of a novel. I turned in like a novella. It's just like I couldn't stretch it any further. There's only
oh
so much that I could
God,
tell a story.
I
So
can
many
relate to that.
words.
I can relate to that. I did an essay once and we had a uni and we asked to do 3,000 words. The teacher said to us, we don't mind you doing over, but make sure they're putting the footnotes to get round it. It came back
Yeah,
to me
of
2 weeks
course.
later. Andrew, I love the 5 pages of your essay. 24 pages of footnote. It's pushing it a little bit, don't you think? So yeah, I can relate to
Beautiful.
that.
Couldn't get away with that
God,
when we used
I've
to
got
handwrite them in the 90s.
oh God,
Good
it
God.
crippled my handwriting, that John so definitely. So right, listen, mate. Anyway, look back into the hard sell for yourself. People find out more information, conscious of the time, mate. Okay. If people find out more about you, Jamie, where do you recommend it?
Mhm. Okay, well, very handily, my username on pretty much every channel in the world is Jamie Woods 77. And if you remember that I'm a massive Star Wars fan, and that's the year of my birth.
Yeah, now people are wondering
Oh yeah.
today on the video side, I can see a Star Wars theme in the back there, so that's your clue, right?
I know, right? So yeah, jamiewood77.com, at jamiewood77, Twitter and Instagram, and links to buy me book and all that stuff. You can get that from Amazon, paperback and Kindle. I'll sell you a signed copy through punkdust.com, which is publisher. Okay. Yeah,
Subtle
and
thing,
yeah, I confused my dad.
yeah.
He was like, if I'd known it was you, I'd have just sent you the money. I was like, sorry. But yeah, I do sign paperbacks with beautiful bookmarks, which I have here. So
Oh,
Red
yes.
Blood Cells, Punk Dust Poetry, and you get badges too, which say Rebel and Punk Dust Poetry on them.
Brilliant.
Yeah, Jamie Wood 77,
Sounds
punkdust.com.
sounds great to me, mate. Good luck with it. So, right, anyway, we better wrap up
Yeah,
part 2 here, part 1, and get a quick break, and we should be back when Jamie to do a few poems for us. Great stuff, mate. See you all.
thank you, Andrew.
2 shakes of the dice.